She did not say it gently, I want to be clear about that, because the version of this story that sounds like a romantic comedy would have her say it with a laugh, or with her eyes soft, or in the golden hour light of something cinematic. That is not what happened. What happened was that it was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday in October, and we were on my couch with the remains of a dinner we had made together, and she had been quiet in a way I had been noticing for 20 minutes without mentioning it, and then she put down her wine glass, turned to look at me, and grabbed my face with both hands, not roughly, but with intention, the way you take hold of something you are trying to make stay still, and said it. "Stop being so easy to fall for." Then she let go. She looked at her wine glass. She did not look at me. I sat very still. My name is Noah Reeves. I was 33, a pediatric occupational therapist, which means I spent my days helping small children learn to navigate a world that was not always designed for the way their minds and bodies worked. And I had gotten reasonably good at it by learning to pay attention to what a person needed rather than what they were asking for, which are sometimes the same thing and often not. I was told, by supervisors and by parents and by people who knew me in the general way that people know each other, that I had a quality of presence that made difficult things easier. I did not know exactly how to explain this quality, except that it was not a technique. It was just how I was. This had not always served me well in the ways I needed it to. I want to be honest about the pattern because it is relevant to everything that came after. The women I had been with, genuinely, not unkindly, I am not telling a story about being wronged, had a consistent experience of me. They found the early part easy. I noticed things, I remembered things, I showed up in the specific ways rather than the general ways, which meant that being with me had a texture of being known rather than just being liked. This was real. I was not performing it. But what happened, eventually, was that the ease of it created a kind of comfort, and comfort, for some people, is not enough to stay for. I had been told I was too good at this, too easy to be with, too present in a way that made someone feel held without feeling challenged, and the challenge, it turned out, was the thing they needed more. I had heard this in different forms and had understood it the way you understand something you cannot change about yourself, and have decided not to resent. I had accepted that being this way meant being, for most people, a place they passed through rather than stayed in. What I had not accepted, what I would not have said out loud if you had asked me, was that I had started to pre-grieve the ending of things before they had ended. That I had stopped trusting the early readiness of people who responded to me with warmth, because warmth had not been proof of permanence, and I had learned the difference too many times. That I had become, in a slow and entirely reasonable way, a person who did not let himself be the first to say what he was feeling, because being the first had cost him more than once. Her name was Petra Solano. She had been my best friend for 4 years, my neighbor for 2 of those, and the person I called when my mother was diagnosed, and the person I sat with when her father died, and the person who had apparently been falling for me at some point in the course of all of that, and had decided tonight was when she was going to say so, sideways, in the form of an instruction, with both hands on my face. She picked up her wine glass. I was still sitting very still. "Petra," I said. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't do the thing where you're gentle about it." She was looking at her glass. "I can't handle you being gentle about it right now." "I'm not going to be gentle about it," I said. "I'm going to ask you what you meant." She looked at me then. The expression on her face was the one I had seen on her in the difficult moments, the one that was not vulnerability exactly but was adjacent to it, the expression of someone who has said the true thing and now has to stay in the room with the fact that they said it. "I think you know what I meant," she said. "I think I do too," I said. "I want to hear you say the rest of it." Here is what 4 years of being Petra Solano's best friend looked like, because you need to understand the architecture of it before you understand the Tuesday. It looked like her at my kitchen table at 8 in the morning, because she had a key and she made better coffee than I did, and had decided somewhere in year 2 that she was going to be the one who made it, and I had accepted this arrangement because it was accurate. She did make better coffee, and because there was something about 8 in the morning with Petra at my kitchen table that had become the specific texture of a day starting well. It looked like us at the farmer's market on Saturdays, when neither of us had anything else going on, which was most Saturdays, because we had the kind of friendship that fills the available space without either person noticing how completely it has done so. It looked like the night her father died, when she called me at 2 a.m. from the hospital and I was in her car outside the ER entrance in 11 minutes. I have never told her how fast I drove. And I sat with her in the parking lot for an hour and a half while she talked about things that had nothing to do with what had just happened and everything to do with it. It looked like her, 6 weeks later, returning the favor in a way I had not asked for and could not have described the need for, showing up at my apartment on a Sunday with groceries and the particular efficient competence of someone who knew exactly what kind of help was useful and was going to provide it without asking for permission. We had never talked about what we were. We had never needed to, which is how these things happen, not through avoidance but through sufficiency. What we were was sufficient. What we were was the first call and the known quantity and the person whose name came up when anyone asked about the important people. It was the kind of friendship that other people noticed before we did. Friends who assumed we were together before either of us had named a different thing, who were corrected and then remained unconvinced, who understood something about the proportion of it that we were still pretending was ordinary. It had been sufficient for 4 years, and I had been telling myself that sufficiency was the same as completeness. I had been wrong about that. I knew this before the Tuesday. What I had not known was that she did too. Let me tell you about the month before the Tuesday, because it had been a month of small things that had accumulated in the specific way small things do when they are not actually small. She had been distracted. Not in a way most people would notice. Petra was good at the surface of things, at the socially competent management of her interior, but I had spent 4 years learning to read her, and what I was reading in October was a woman who was somewhere other than where she appeared to be. She answered questions slightly after she normally would. She laughed at the right moments, but not the way she usually laughed, which was one of the things about her that I had catalogued without realizing I was cataloging it. She looked at me sometimes, and then looked away, in a way that had a texture I could not identify. I had not said anything. Not because I missed it, I did not miss it, but because I had learned, with Petra, that the things she was working through came out when they were ready and not before, and that the right support was presence rather than pressure. What I had not understood was that I was the thing she was working through. The Tuesday had started ordinarily. She came over after work. We made dinner. The pasta she had taught me to make 2 winters ago, the one with the lemon and the capers, the one I now made better than she did, and which she had accepted with the specific grace of a person who has decided to be proud of what they taught, rather than protective of the method. We opened a bottle of wine she had brought. We talked about her week, which had been difficult in the way that weeks in social work are difficult, not with single events but with the accumulated weight of being a person who sits with other people's hardest things. I understood something about this, in the professional way and in the personal one. I had spent my working days helping children who needed the world to be patient with them learn to move through it. She had spent hers helping families navigate systems that were not designed for the hardest moments. We had, over 4 years, had more conversations about the cost of this kind of work than most people have in a lifetime. She knew what mine felt like. I knew what hers felt like. That mutual knowing was the specific intimacy of what we were. Not romantic, not requiring a name, just thoroughly and specifically known. I had listened. I had asked the right questions. I had been present in the way I apparently am, which I do not experience as a skill, and which, apparently, is the problem. At some point the conversation wound down into the comfortable silence we had, the kind that does not require management. The apartment was warm. The wine was low. I had refilled her glass at some point without thinking about it, the way you do things for someone whose needs have become automatic. And she had been the different kind of quiet, and then she put down her wine glass and turned and grabbed my face. "I've been trying to stop," she said. She was looking at me now. She had made the decision to look at me, and she was doing it with the full force of the directness she brought to things she had decided to be honest about. "Stop what?" I said, even though I knew. "Falling." She said it without decoration. For about 8 months, I've been trying to talk myself out of it. I've made the arguments. I know all the arguments. We're best friends. It would change everything. You probably don't. She stopped. The arguments are good arguments. I've been making them for 8 months and they have not worked, and tonight She looked at her hands. Tonight you did that thing where you refilled my glass before I knew I wanted more, and I just got so tired of being sensible about it. I looked at her. Not because I needed time to understand what she had said, because I needed a moment for what I had been carrying to catch up with what she had just handed me. 8 months, I said. Give or take, she said. I stopped. Started again. How long do you think I've been easy to fall for? For you specifically? She looked at me. Something shifted in her expression. The first movement toward a different register, out of the braced quality and into something that was still careful but less defended. I don't know, she said. When did it start? The night your father died, I said. In the parking lot, you were talking about the first time he took you fishing, which had nothing to do with what had just happened. It had everything to do with it, she said quietly. I know, I said. That's when. I looked at her. I drove to that hospital in 11 minutes, Petra. From my apartment. At 2 in the morning. You should know how fast that was. She was very still. I've been making the same arguments you've been making, I said, for longer than 8 months. The friendship, the risk, all of it. I'm very good at the arguments. I've been making them for, I thought about it honestly, for about as long as I can remember being this aware of you. She looked at me for a long moment. I watched the thing she had been holding for 8 months rearrange itself in her expression, not released, not resolved, but reconfigured into something that had room for what I had just said. You were going to let me keep making the arguments, she said. I didn't want to be the one who... I stopped. Who what? There it was. The real answer. The one I had been not saying in the specific way she had been not saying hers. I've been left before, I said. By people who said I was easy to love. They meant it when they said it. The easy part turned out to be the problem. It made me easy to set down. I looked at her. I didn't want to be the one who said it first and then found out I was wrong about what we were. She looked at me with the expression she had when she was understanding something she had not understood before. Not surprised, but recalibrated, putting a piece into a place where it clarified the whole picture. You thought you were going to be wrong about me, she said. I've been wrong before, I said. Noah, she said my name the way she said it when she wanted me to actually hear her. I've had a key to your apartment for 2 years. I make your coffee. I know which drawer you keep the things you don't want to find, and which drawer you keep the things you need. I have been... She stopped. Took a breath. I have been so far inside the architecture of your life for so long that the question of whether you would be wrong about me is... She reached out, not to grab my face this time. She put one hand along the side of my jaw. The way you hold something you are not trying to restrain. The way you hold something you are trying to stay in contact with. The question isn't whether you'd be wrong about me, she said. The question is whether we're both going to keep being sensible about something that stopped being sensible a long time ago. I want to tell you something about being easy to fall for, because she was right that it was a thing about me and I had spent years not understanding what kind of thing it was. I had understood it as a liability. As the quality that made me the warm-up act. The person someone loved in the comfortable way before they found the person they loved in the real way. I had been told I was too present, too attentive, too quick to know what someone needed, and I had heard these things as the soft explanation for why I was not the person people stayed with. I had started to believe, in the careful way you believe things you do not want to be true, that there was something about the way I showed up that invited people in, and then, eventually, out. That being easy to love was not the same as being worth staying for. Not because they were cruel, because the ease made them comfortable, and comfort, for those people, in those relationships, was not the same as chosen. I had spent years wondering if the very thing that drew people toward me was also the thing that made leaving easier. Whether being this available, this attentive, this reliably there had created a kind of ambient warmth that people could leave the way you leave a room that has always been warm, without ceremony, without noticing the cold until you were already out in it. These are the kinds of thoughts a person thinks when they have been the warm-up act more than once and have not yet found a better explanation for why. What I had not understood, what Petra grabbing my face on a Tuesday night made clear to me in a way I could not think my way around, was that being easy to fall for is not the same thing for everyone who experiences it. For some people it is comfort. For Petra, it had been, apparently, its own kind of undoing. She had not found it easy to manage. She had spent 8 months making good arguments against it. She had grabbed my face when the arguments stopped working because she was tired, not of feeling it, but of being the only one in the room who was feeling it, and pretending she wasn't. She was not comfortable, she was undone. There is a difference, and I had not known until that Tuesday that the difference was everything. I put my hand over hers, the one on my jaw. She looked at me. "I'm going to stop being sensible," I said. "Yeah," she said, quietly. Like someone who has been waiting for a specific thing and is being careful not to assume that the thing they're hearing is the thing they've been waiting for. "Yeah," I said. She looked at me for a moment with the expression that was hers specifically, the one I had 4 years of context for, the one I could read the way you read something you have been studying without knowing you were studying it. What was in it was not relief, exactly. Something more settled than relief. Something that looked like a person arriving at a place they had been trying to get to for a long time. "Good," she said. Not a declaration, not a speech. One word. The way she said things she meant precisely. Without excess, without performance. Directly and with full weight. Good. She still makes the coffee. That has not changed, and I want you to know that, because it matters which things change and which things don't. What changed? The Tuesday night became the beginning of us figuring out what the architecture was now that we had said the things we had not said. This was not seamless. We were two people who had spent 4 years building something careful, and careful things are not always easy to renegotiate. There were nights in November where neither of us was sure we had done it right. There was a conversation in December that required more honesty than either of us had been used to bringing to something we valued this much. She told me in December about the specific night she had first understood what it was. It was 6 months before the Tuesday, a Sunday in April when I had driven 40 minutes to her apartment because she had texted me that she was having a bad day, and I had just shown up, unannounced, with the particular grocery run I knew she would want, without asking what kind of bad it was. She had opened the door and I had stood there with a bag, and she had looked at my face and thought, "This is the problem. Not that I was there, that I had come without being asked, that I had known what to bring, that I had simply understood." She had shut the door behind me and thought, "I am in serious trouble." She had spent 6 months after that managing it, making the arguments, keeping the friendship exactly what it appeared to be, because she could not afford to lose the friendship, and she did not yet know what else to do with the rest of it. She had done this carefully, competently, with the same skill she brought to everything that mattered, and then one Tuesday in October I had refilled her glass before she knew she wanted more, and she had run out of careful. I drove 40 minutes on a Sunday in April without being asked. She grabbed my face on a Tuesday in October because she was tired of being sensible. We had been moving toward the same place from different directions, in the only way two people like us could have done it, slowly, then all at once. What I want to tell you is this. Petra had been right, in the moment she said it, that I was easy to fall for. She had also been right that it was a problem. What she had not been able to see yet, standing at 8 months of talking herself out of it, was that the problem was not a flaw. The problem was that she had found the version of it that didn't make her comfortable. She had found the version that made it impossible to stop. Not because I had changed, not because she had, because this was the specific form the thing took when it landed between the right two people. Not comfort. Recognition. Like a map overlaid on the actual terrain and finding, for the first time, that they match. Have you ever had someone be angry at you for exactly who you are, and understood, the moment they said it, that the anger was the truest compliment you'd ever received? And did you know what to say? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one found you somewhere real, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.